All right, welcome everyone to the second episode of the Unchained Vodcast, where we will sit here, Kriss, myself, and our guest, which happens today to be the amazing Brand yet again. We will spend between 40 and 50 minutes of your life talking about Camelot Unchained, what's going on, game news, classes. Recently, lots of stuff about classes because that's the big news. Classes are coming out. Well, they've came out, I should say. We know about pretty much every class now except for one, the Assassins. We're still waiting on those. And the Crafters. We cannot forget the Crafters. So two classes. I have to correct myself.
We should really not forget about those.
You don't need to know anything about them, right, Kriss?
Yes, I do.
He might have
I
a
need
fit
crafting
if they
in my
delay
life.
crafting anymore. I know every time they say they're pushing back the crafting announcement, I can see the little vein pulse in your temple just kind of twitching.
Yes.
And all the people complaining that stealthers have come last, that's not true. Crafters came last, so
yes,
you can at least know that. Anyway, how are you guys doing tonight?
No love for the crafters.
I know Kriss just got home from work.
Yep.
Doing good.
Well, otherwise, pretty good.
Good.
We got a working video, as everyone can see.
All right. In that case, Brand, by the way, I should mention our little intro video that everyone just got to watch. Brand is the one that made that for us.
That's his fault.
All credit for him goes to him
video
for that.
And music included.
And the music, yes. I shouldn't forget that. We totally stole your music for it. But
Yes.
Anyway, moving on to today's topic, which is rock solid healing. I was thinking about going, do you smell what the healing is cooking? But I decided for a different pun today, a little bit lighter. Yeah. I tried to make a Def Leppard pun for Rock of Ages, but I couldn't do it. So, rock solid healing is what we got. So, we've got that live stream just happened. Personally, I was very enthusiastic about it. We learned about the Physician, a potion-flinging alchemist for the Arthurians. We've got the Empath, who can actually sacrifice his own well-being for his allies. And then, of course, we've got the Stone Healer, who heals through the power of beating people to death with rocks.
No, beating people to life.
Beating people to life with rocks.
It's rather blunt healing, if you ask me.
Yes.
So, self-sacrifice and Def Leppard references aside, let's talk about the different classes of healing and talk about, I guess, how we feel about the different focuses, and then I want to talk about the actual mechanics of healing themselves. So, starting off with the Vikings for once, since I've referenced them about 50 times already because of all the puns that are going to be made for the rest of time about their name and their abilities. The Stone Healers. Anybody? What were your reactions when they pulled up the Stone Healer?
I laughed a bit, I must admit.
I'm still laughing, obviously.
Yeah, it was quite unexpected. I really didn't see that coming. It's an interesting twist, and for me it's the same reaction as for the Physician. It's you're actually using physical healing, physical projectile for healing. As they said around the end of the cast, it's gonna be interesting to see the placement for all that.
As Donnie says, it's an infomercial about the healing power of stones. Place these warm stones in the portions of your body to channel your body's ki.
Yeah. I actually thought they weren't being serious when they announced that, and then they were. And then I got excited because I'm actually a huge fan of runes, and that kind of seemed like thematically what they were going with is like rune stones that you throw at people, which was really cool.
Yeah, I have to agree with that because I did notice reading through it, delving into it a little bit deeper as I tend to do for my posts that I put up on Realms Unchained. I looked into all the healing spells that they have, and really, though we joke about hitting people with rocks, there's only like one of them that even mentions actually throwing rocks at people. The other ones are like putting a rock down, emanating the spells from the rock, so it's not like they're going to be constantly walking around with a bunch of pebbles and just going, and you get a heal, and you get a heal, and you're a jerk, so you get a really big heal.
No, they. I think the first thing that came to mind when they talked about the stones that you put in place and then throw spells at it to activate different effects. Uh, I hate that game, so I hated seeing the reference, but it made me think about the shamans in WoW with all the totems.
It made me think of shamans, and it made me immediately think of the Blessed Crow and their cauldrons, which they put down and
Yes.
emanate heals
So-
and buffs off of those.
Yes.
It's a very similar
very
sort
similar.
of mechanic.
Yeah.
So what do you think, looking at some of their abilities, what do you think are the, I guess, general pros and cons for the Stone Healer?
Well, the first con is that it's projectile based healing, meaning it can be with some of the abilities we know will exist. It can be blocked, just blocking the line of sight. We know about the stone walls. Imagine putting stone walls between the heavy fighters and the healers. How do you heal around that? Well, the stone healers, they said, will be a lot more mobile because most of the Viking class are very mobile. So I think it's going to be interesting. The fact that they will have to go pick up their rock before moving on because it's expendable resources. I think that's a good twist.
They can
That
get
makes
back
it
some of that charge.
pretty. Yes.
Yeah. Another thing with the physical projectiles means it's not going to synergize as much with magic-based abilities, which is
Yes.
another con. They're not going to be able to work as coordinated with, say, the devout as people might hope, because it's not magic-based healing, at least for them.
Possibly. One thing I did notice is that they seem like they would have a slightly higher emphasis on AoE heals because of the rock placements. I'm assuming
Yes.
the throwing the rocks, that's going to be straight on, just one target, heals. But then they can place a rock and boost heals off of that, which is kind of interesting. On the one hand, it's more AoE heals. So the Vikings will kind
they
of
did
benefit
say-
from that. But also, because they place it down, the Vikings are supposed to be mobile to a certain degree. They're supposed to be aggressive and going in. They're not as mobile as the Tuatha for sure, so they're not
Yes.
going to be going in and out all the time. But I kind of picture them going in, hitting, and keeping to move, try to keep advancing aggressively.
Yeah.
So you have to throw the rock down, go heal, and then run in, pick it back up, run back up there, throw the
Yeah.
big rock down.
That kind of
Well,
tethers
if
them
it's
in a
a-
way.
Not always, because if it's a charge, the moment you reach the rock you threw, you just pick it up and then move forward again.
So you think they'll be able to throw it at a longer distance so that they can like chunk a rock placement ahead, charge to
Yes.
it, and then fight?
I think it will be part of their tactics, meaning the stone healer says, okay, I've got a rock placed right there. Move the group in a way that to reach that place where basically they prepared a mass healing in that place as a triggered effect, kinda, because they said there's gonna be some charged effect that can be triggered. Also, we know that AoE effects will be less powerful. I think the pebble throwing will be the very targeted, powerful heals for limbs, for the actual limbs and part of the body that need to be healed, and those will be more powerful than the AoEs that will be more sustained, probably healing, like heal over time or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the rocks tether them down a little bit. And then, of course, it's completely optional if you want to pick them up. Being an inventory item, you could throw them
Yes.
out and ignore them and just keep going. Eventually, you'll run out of rocks, which is why they emphasize you pick them back up. But you could just leave them alone if you wanted to.
And Karuin, if that's how that's pronounced, just said in chat, it also pointed out that the rocks can be destroyed. Most of the things in the game that can be put down or picked up can also be destroyed. So if you can throw the rock ahead, it might get destroyed before your people get there. And also, the only reason to pick it up though is if it hasn't expended all of its charge. So if you throw it down for some healing support and people rush off, you can immediately pick it back up to get that blood back, so that it's not wasted, which is good. I think that, and it's probably going to be vital for them since the Vikings are going to be hitting and they're going to be pretty aggressive. So to me, they're going to have to decide whether or not they're winning a conflict pretty quick. If they get in there, hit it hard. If they're doing well, keep pushing. If not, maybe withdraw and find another way to go into it. Probably going to have to not thinking as much on their feet as the Tuatha. But speaking of the Tuatha, what do you think?
Just one thing to add, a quick thought on the Stone Healers. I really want to see them going out and actually gather the pebbles to have their spells.
But they have to get them from crafters. The crafters got to craft those pebbles, man.
They have to bring the rocks, and the rocks are broken down by crafters.
You don't think the crafters will just mine up rocks and then engrave them for them and go, here's your rock?
No. I think the crafters will provide the rocks. They will have to engrave them.
Yeah, I believe the engraving is like a component-based ability, so the actual stone healer has to engrave the rocks to get the effect.
Yeah, I don't know, but they did mention having all this stuff crafted, which implies that there'll be an increase in potency between different types of rocks. Same thing with the alchemists.
I think it will work like the arrows, meaning they can make their own, which will be pretty basic. But the ones provided by the crafters will be much more powerful.
Yeah, it just is curious to me because the empath is the only one of the healers that doesn't have any kind of an ammunition listed like that. So I do wonder if they're going to have a weapon of some sort, like a spell book or a scepter or something that crafters can still make to increase their potency. Because they'll need something to keep on par with it to some degree. Speaking of the empath, how do y'all feel about this idea that the empath, to some degree, has to sacrifice health and well-being of himself to benefit his allies?
It's actually, to me, it's the most interesting one of the three. I really love the concept. That one, I don't know, it clicked for me, and the concept really looks cool and interesting to play.
I agree. It's definitely different than the other two. Kind of different from what you would expect for the TDD as a whole, because they're not as mobile. They're not as capable of, say, running away. That we know that whole realm is kind of going towards being mobile a bit. It's definitely more magey, which I like. The comparison and the contrast between the other two.
It is a good point because a lot of the TDD classes do either have seem to have some sort of an escape mechanism, or they have some like regen or something to help keep them alive so that they can fight, leave, come back, fight, leave. And then the empath is almost working to his own detriment. He gets in there, he's going to have to be especially careful, which I think is a good balancing mechanic. Has to balance and keep from getting too close to the combat or getting too vulnerable. Now he does have the simulacrum that he can make, the facsimile of his target that he can make.
That's
for one
very
spell.
Specialized.
For one spell,
exactly.
But that's your main heal. You know, if you have one main heal that you do, you go, all right, make my facsimile. I'm going to say that because it's easier for me to say. And I just keep throwing it out, and I can use this and burn off points from him instead of sacrificing my own health.
Right.
Which I think will actually help a lot. I think we'll see that being used a bunch.
Very much, yes.
I think it'll be mostly when they're trying to do other things that they're going to be draining off of themselves.
I think the empath, to be really efficient, will have to be very specialized, so they can use the simulacrum a lot more efficiently and not sacrifice too much of their health. So I wouldn't be surprised to see groups with 2 or 3 empath specialized, each one specialized in one type of spell to use their simulacrum with.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see it as a back and forth game. It's a huge management between healing your team, and then using their channel heal to slowly build up their own life back up. So I definitely see it just going back and forth, back and forth. Maybe not every other, but heal some of your party up a couple times, and then focus on just healing yourself back up
Yes,
to full.
but, I like that. It's a good counterpart to the resource management that you get for the stone healer and the physician. The only difference is that the resource you have to manage is your own life, because the only big disadvantage they have is that if they screw up their resource management, they die. Whereas the physician just becomes useless. Physician and stone healer,
less useful anyway.
Yeah.
yeah, kind of useless.
They did kind of imply it'll be like arrows, I think, in that with the rocks and the potions, that your really good spells may run out, but you're probably still going to have some sort of heals that you can do.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And so not just with the resource management on that, and that means the empath more than the other two has to really focus and worry about where they're placed in the field, so that they're not being targeted
who they are around. Yeah, and who they are around also.
Yeah.
And make sure they're not vulnerable to certain people's arrows.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or spells, or swords, or whatever. I do like how they seem to really be focusing on the 3 healer classes on this resource management thing. Because I think it's important. I'm going to bring it up a little bit when we talk about the mechanics of healing overall. That they're really trying to make the healers harder to play, but make them more involved, so that you're not just sitting there looking at health bars going, spell, spell. Oh, I'm out of mana. Wait a minute. Spell. Someone buff me. They're making it more, because that was boring just to say.
Yes.
So I like that they're adding things in there to make it more complicated. The resource management. Speaking of the last one, the physician, they are an alchemist. Personally, I absolutely love the flavor of where they're going with this class, making it into essentially an apothecary. It's essentially
pretty much
a medieval healer who's my only regret was that I didn't see an ability in the list of abilities that involve leeches. I was like, can we have something that like neutralizes poison, but you throw leeches on them and it drains their blood, but gets rid of like a poison effect or something? Because that would be perfect.
Yeah, the physician is actually really fun. It's kind of like an alchemist.
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting. The fact that also it's gonna be the same. I like that the crafters will be involved, because I don't think the crafter will make the potions. The crafters will make the vials.
Right, which is what I was saying.
And I really like the idea of the way the crafting has been advertised so far. We can't really talk about it in public, but the way it's been advertised, I can already think about a dozen different recipes for different vials, for different effects, for different powers, because I think the vials made by the crafters will be kind of bigger, so giving more power to the potions compared to what the popcorn ones that the physicians will be able to make.
Naruan's over here saying that he's going to be healing in the shade, enjoying the rain of my arrows.
Yeah.
With the I keep wanting to call him the apothecary. With the physician, since he has to throw potions, a part of me feels like, I guess there's no real reason for it, but a part of me just feels like throwing a potion at a really long range is not feasible. It's not very realistic. So it feels like they're going to have to be closer in to the combat.
I think all of them will have to.
I think all the healers.
I don't think I don't think we'll have long range healers. The healers will have to be in the melee, kinda, not exactly in the middle of the melee, but they will have to be pretty close enough to be vulnerable, because they did say that left alone, the healers are extremely powerful, but they're easy to disrupt. So they have to put them at a short enough distance from the fights to be able to be disrupted. Otherwise, they just do what they do and be left alone. If they are too far too hard to reach, that doesn't make it interesting for them and for the others to try to counter them.
Right, and the whole point about the mobility of the healers would be neutralized if they were a long-range class. Giving them mobility is the balance of them having to be a lot closer.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. That's how I felt looking at it. I felt like the physician was definitely going to be a little bit closer range. He's basically a crazy mad alchemist that's pouring potions and stuff on his allies, splashing them with vials and stuff. Most of them do feel like they're going to be a little bit closer. The empaths seem to me like they might have the longest range because they're not having to directly throw anything. There was no mention of how that's going to work, so they may have more direct abilities. I don't know. In chat, Rhaegar asked if the empath's simulacrum, however you pronounce that, I'll have to look it up. I should have looked it up before the cast. Can be
simulacrum.
Thank you.
Simulacrum.
Can be attacked and killed. I don't know. As Kriss said in the chat, I don't know. They didn't say that specifically, but I think it would make sense that you could.
It probably will. Well, I'm going to lean towards yes.
I mean, the stones can probably be destroyed. The Blessed Crow's cauldrons could be targeted and destroyed. The lanterns can be targeted and destroyed. So I'm pretty sure if you put that dummy out and start using it to fuel some of your spells, people can come in and shoot it and kill it. That's probably one way to disrupt the empaths, is to mess up their simulacrums.
They would probably get a backlash from that.
Yeah, but going back to melee range, I kind of agree with Niruin. He said even if the healers are close to the melees, I don't think enemy melees can reach them. And some people were talking about this being an issue. Honestly, I agree, because I think if you're playing a healer, you're going to be behind the other people.
Yes.
You're not going to be right in the front line. That would be stupid.
Right.
You're going to have to be in the back because you're squishy. You want to hide behind the warriors and heal them. That's your lot in life.
You might or might not be squishy. They did say you won't necessarily have to wear cloth or light armor.
That's true. You could wear heavy armor.
Yeah.
And then be vulnerable to spells, probably.
You will be less mobile, but you will be less squishy at the same time. So that also will be a probable point of balance for the healers to decide.
It's entirely possible, though. Personally, I think that if someone wants to go heavy armor and get right in the front lines, they might as well play a devout at that point. But that's just my personal opinion in the matter. Since we've mentioned the three classes, I wanted to look a bit into healing. For people who tuned in that may not be familiar with how the healing system is going to work, it is not a direct exchange health for HP or mana for HP system. The system of the game works. You have various body parts. These body parts have health totals. Once that health total is exceeded, your character gets a wound. When you accumulate like 3 wounds, you die. Also, if you lose all of your blood, which is a resource, which can be used for spells and also can be drained through like bleed effects and other effects. If you lose all of your blood, you die. Healers can heal both HP and wounds. Now, another thing that's in the game, well, I'll mention that in a minute. One thing that came up in the cast, there were a bunch of people who gave the big thumbs up during the live stream and said, we like this, it's awesome. I liked it. I know the Amazing Brand liked it. I know Kriss liked it because we've already talked about this before. But several people said, I want to go through some of the reasons, but several people said it was too hard. It sounded too hard, too complicated, while other people said it sounded too boring. Does that even work?
Very different.
It depends on the expectation of each. I think it's a question of expectation. A lot of people, I think the ones who find it boring would find any type of healing boring, pretty much. Strange. It actually surprised me that I think the healer from all the casts, it's the first one that's really controversial. Most of the others have received a pretty unanimous, positive.
Mostly.
Mostly.
But the healer is the one that has the most mixed feeling, which is always the case for the healers anyway.
That was one thing when people some people were fussing about it, I really was like, I wish I could get the people who are complaining and poll them to see how many actually want to play healers.
Yeah, that too.
And how many of them know about the devout.
There's a couple reasons for it, probably, and one of them is that these healers are not your standard healer from any MMO currently out. Like, people were expecting a magic-based mana for heal, type of healer, and none of these are like that. They're different. They're not going to be used to it, and so in that regard, the expectation was not there. It was a completely different type of reveal.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot different for some people because they are pure healers. Most of the classes in this game are highly focused in a way that people aren't used to. Take the mages. The mages, for the most part, especially the Arthurian mage, they do DPS. That's all they do. They blast people with spells and they hurt them. And they hurt them a lot, and that's all they do. And then you get to the healer, they're the polar opposite. They heal people, and that's all they do. That is their thing in life. They just heal. And a lot of people, I think a lot of people think that will be boring, that they'll just heal, but that's it. But I've talked to some of the people I've talked to who like to play healers seem to be enthusiastic about that. They're like, that's all I want to do.
I've been playing healer in MMOs for the last 4 years. Used to be a tank, and this is one of the most exciting reveals to me. And I know we have a couple other people in the guild who are even more excited than I am about this.
Yeah, definitely.
I kind of agree, again, with Neruin, who said that the concept can be boring since they're just doing one or maybe two things. But they do have even though they're just healing. They're healing, maybe they have a buff or something. Hopefully we're not losing Brand perpetually here, because that's going to really mess up our video. Yes, he's back. All right. So they can heal. Maybe they have like a buff or something they can do with that a little bit, but they have a couple different types of heals they can do. That's all they can do. But they've got a lot to manage to compensate for that. I mean, they've got to look at people's wounds. They've got to look at their total health. Yeah. They've got to figure out, do I heal the body part or do I just heal the whole person? Personally, for me, I think it's too much to keep up with, where some people were saying it's too hard. But I think what that's going to turn into is you can't do that on the grand scale. You can't say there's 30 people in my group. I'm going to do that for all of them. You go, okay, I'm going to heal you guys. I'm doing AoE heals. I'm going heal. I'm healing your HP. But then I have one or two tanks or maybe somebody else that I'm focused on, and I'm doing his wounds.
For the wounds.
Yeah, and healing his limbs and stuff. That's my guy right there. I think that's how it's going to go into.
That focus, I think another thing someone brought up in the cast was too much clutter thinking about raid frames and such, because that's how people heal, especially with all the add-ons, and that they brought up heal vision as a alternative to raid frames. And we don't really know what heal vision is, and no one else does, so they're not really sure how it's going to work, and they might just be a little afraid that there's just too much to go on if you have all these different healing options per person.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, Sacrix is in chat saying that healing is already a hard job, and I agree. That's what I'm saying. I think it's too much to expect the wound system and the limbs and everything to work with a large quantity of people. I think it's going to have to be a system where you can more easily heal large groups of people, but the one or two, you're going to have to focus on just a couple individuals where you do your real focused healing. Like, these are my people, like your tanks. You're going to be like, all right, these are my tanks. I want to keep them up. Everyone else, you just get some fountain heals or something. There you go, have a little AoE. And then everyone else, I want to keep you alive. Because I don't think you're going to be able to nitpick with them, go into healer vision, and expect to see wounds for every single person. That's going to be crazy.
Right.
I don't know any way to do that.
I think it's a bit too convoluted, and they will have to simplify the things. I think the wound system, I love the idea. I'm not sure how practical it will be on large-scale battles. It's okay in group versus groups, where you have 5, 8, 12 people around you that you have to focus on. When you have raids of 100, 150 during sieges, for example, it's going to be insane. And it's going to be way too complicated and taking not just thoughts, because it's good that playing takes some thoughts, but it's gonna diffuse your attention too much, and it's too many things to actually take into consideration just for one player. Multiply that, it's not just multiplying, it's exponential, because people don't never focus on one person at a time. So you're gonna have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people that gonna have 2 wounds that you're gonna have to heal, because at the third they die. So I think it's right now a bit too complicated. And as Donnie said, I think a lot of people were disappointed because they're still in the frame of mind of a PvE game where you have to level solo sometimes, and there's no solo possibility if you're a pure healer and don't have skill. But you don't need to fight as a healer in that game. You won't need to, because the leveling will be different. So I think that's also why some people were disappointed.
Yeah, I have to say, Brand, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Factoring in, and this is an issue where I think some people might have issue with this as well, is that they're also perhaps not taking into context the type of combat in Camelot Unchained. So, given that how slow paced the combat is going to be compared to most MMOs, how do you think that is going to affect the healing in the game and healing of the wounds, the limbs, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, healing is a heavy part reaction based, and with all the slow casting and the slow damage that will be coming in, you'll have more time to at least react to it, but at the same time, you won't have a quick time casting the spell to react to it. And so I don't think too much changes, but you're definitely have a little bit more time to think in between spells and actions, which may or may not tip the difficulty balance towards easy or even harder. But I think it might help just having that extra 2 seconds to think.
Well, the main thing I was thinking of with it, since the combat is slower, and there's line of sight issues, which we'll get into in a minute, where, if somebody's shooting fireballs, you can hide behind someone so you don't get hit by the fireball. So the thing with me is, does it become more of the individual player's responsibility to come back and get the heals rather than just the healer having to always watch everyone? Or does it become more your responsibility when you're standing in the front line and you go, oh no, I've got 2 wounds, to stop and go, let me get off the line, get in the back, and go get heals so I don't die?
I think it's honestly, a bit of both.
Yeah, honestly, I can see 90% of the player not doing that.
Oh yeah.
And saying it's the healer's job to heal me. That's the Zerg
healer's
mentality.
Lot in life.
that's the Zerg mentality, and that's the healer's curse. But people in that game, will, if we keep the wound system, people will have to start getting smart in the way they deal with healers, and we'll have to withdraw, get to the healer, make it easier to have the line of sight, and have your wounds healed. Otherwise, you're going to be useless because you're going to die, and the time from the respawn back to the fight will be taken into factor as well, making you pretty much useless.
Yeah. Go ahead.
As a healer, it is our job to heal. I think it also comes down to the player to put themselves in positions where the healers are not too stressed. But as a healer, I don't trust anyone to do the right thing, so I take it upon myself to always put myself in the position where I'm not going to get stressed. And I think that's just part of healing in any MMOs. It comes down to us to make those decisions.
I certainly think it's going to be a mixture. I think the healer themselves is going to be busy, but it's kind of like I said. To me, it seems like to get the full benefit of healing wounds and targeted body parts and everything, the healer's going to have to focus on 1 or 2 people. They're going to be healing everyone in general, but then they're going to have like maybe a handful of people that they go, okay, these 2 or 3 guys, I want to keep you up. You're my tanks, so I'm going to be throwing some better heals at you. Meanwhile, for anyone else that's not getting the targeted heal, at least in an organized group, let me preface that, an organized group, if they start getting low in health, well, then if they don't get off the front line and get somewhere that the healer can take a second to go, okay, you need a heal, they're gonna die. And and honestly, that's kind of can be a mechanic against Zergs. If they have to be more coordinated in how they can make themselves available for heals, Zergs aren't going to be good at doing that. They're not going to know who their healers are, and they're going to die.
It's true.
Yeah. And about what Wonder in chat was wondering about, the stone healers. They did say the stone healers and the physician actually have more mobility than any mage, because you don't need a casting time to throw a rock or throw a potion. Slow them down, but they will not have to stay stationary to actually throw their things.
Yeah,
so they can move
throw while
around
running.
and still healing.
And to respond to Donnie, he said when people start running long distances, they will come off that front line to get heals, and that's kind of where I was going with that. That's how I feel too. If you have to march for 15 minutes to get to the battlefield, you're not going to want to die. But that's the whole point of the slower combat system. People shouldn't be dying in 3 seconds. They should get out there. They should have, most of the time, they should have time to go, oh man, I'm really losing health. I better back up. Let somebody heal me before I go back in. That way people don't die as rapidly. You don't have to have instant respawn behind you because people aren't dying all the time.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fine.
Anyway.
It comes down to what we talked about in a long time ago. It was the time to kill. That's going to be a huge factor for the healers.
TTK, not TTP.
Yes.
No.
Now,
impartial to the difficulty. It's a different system. It'll require different management from CSE, and I definitely want to see what they come up with before making any sort of negative judgment towards it.
that's true as well. We will really need to see a lot of how it really comes out, how they actually put it together. One main issue that people brought up, which has already been mentioned in chat a few times, is line of sight. This is an issue that comes up repeatedly for the game, because as we said, any spell in the game has collision. If you shoot it and someone stands in front of it, it hits them instead of you. If it's an ally, which they do not have friendly fire, so for anybody, throw that out there real quick. If you don't know, they do not have friendly fire in the game, but if you shoot a fireball and your friend stands in front of you, it will hit them, and your spell is wasted. If you're shooting an enemy and the enemy you didn't want to hit gets in front of him via tank, then it's going to hit the person that stepped in front. So a lot of people were saying after the live stream that this makes the healing too complicated. It makes too much of a problem because the healer can't heal people if their allies are all standing in the way at the same time.
Yeah.
So what do you think about line of sight issues when it comes to healing?
I think it's going to need some testing, because I see the potential in making people actually move and care about line of sight. But at the same time, in big melees, because we're not going to have just the group fights. There's going to be sieges. There are going to be big battles. I think that's going to need some testing and seeing how it works. I think the favorite place for healers is going to be heights, where they have a good view of the battlefields.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the physics too, where if you're just throwing a straight throw, like a rock in a straight throw, and then obviously gravity in the game with the air system will bring it down, you're going to hit people you don't want to. But if they opt for something more with an arc as a base animation for it, it has a higher chance of reaching your intended target. So there's mechanical compromises that they can make on their end to make it easy, as well as on our end, players' situational awareness, not crowding up too much, things like that, being in a higher vantage point, like Kriss said. And it's just going to have to get tested before it works.
Yeah, this is, again, I'm droning on about this concept, but this is, to me, where the slower combat and the people having to identify, to some extent, some of them anyway, when they need heals, and then to go get the heal themselves from the healer, because when you have line of sight, there's going to be a bunch of people crowded up in there. The people in the very front line are going to have a hard time getting anything but AoE heals because the direct heals can't get through. So they have to be able to identify, oh, I've got 2 wounds, my health's getting pretty bad, I need to get back so that I can get to the healer. Now, this also does come in with a collision problem of can you even get past your allies and everything to get to the heals. But that's besides the point. It seems to me that the whole system works better if you assume that combat is slower, which they've said before the combat is slower, and you assume that people in organized groups are going to have to take some responsibility for their own health and for getting their own heals. Because of the line of sight issues, then, again, how can you shoot through your allies? But if they're coming to you to at least walk halfway to you to get a heal, they walk out of the main mob and go, heal me, and you throw the heal towards them, and then they turn around and go back to the combat. That's a little bit more feasible. And you see that in other games. I mean, you look at FPS games. There's line of sight issues in there, and some of them have heals, and you'll see somebody run out and be like, dude, heal me, and then he goes, Beer, and heals them like Team Fortress 2, and then he runs off again. That's what happens.
Yeah, and I think it'll all work out after we get our hands on it, after CSE gets time to test it thoroughly, and we'll have something we like.
I'm trying to catch up a little bit on chat here. There's a lot of conversation going, which is good. We got JB in there saying that friendly projectile collision will likely not be a thing. I'm assuming he means projectile on projectile, not projectile on person.
From friendlies, meaning 2 spells from the same faction, from the same realm, won't collide and impact each other.
That's what I'm assuming he means, spell to spell, not spell to body.
No, of course,
under the impression they would collide and form through the air system
a mega
an entirely
spell.
new thing. Yeah, a mega spell.
Yes, but basically, if you, I don't know, it's. I have mixed feeling on that comment because that would mean, for example, you can surround yourself in earth walls, and then your healer can still throw a heal through those. I would be against that.
But a wall is a physical entity as well, so there might be a distinction between that.
Yes,
but like
true.
two different potions being tossed at the same time that collide may interact in a positive way that would not have otherwise happened.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's an interesting statement because that means more question than really answers right now.
It does add a few questions into the mix, but since we don't know, we won't focus on it too much. Just an interesting thing to consider. I did have one final question for both of you before. He's saying that's not what he meant, so I don't know what he means. But anyway, one final question for the both of you. What do you think the role is, the role group-wise? We've kind of hit on this a little bit, but what do you think the role group-wise is going to be for the placement of the pure healers in the game, based on what we know about them?
The role group-wise for the placement of the healer.
Yeah, we've already mentioned that we think they'll be closer to melee.
Yeah. I definitely mid to close range players. Behind the melee. Possibly kind of running around with the support. Is there a mobile class 2 that is also kind of mid to close range?
Yeah. Also, I would like to know because that's not really been said in the cast. If you can affect other people than the ones in your group, even with the AoEs, I would say groups of healers with a few bodyguards moving around will probably the most probable group formation in the battlefield.
It is a good question.
That means AoEs would have to affect people outside of the group. Otherwise, they would have to be in the group, and then they're kind of left on their own because that means most of the group will be fighting, and they will have to move to avoid not just detection but interruptions from others and interception.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we had the same question with the Bard. Do their abilities affect people outside of their group? or not. It's a little bit different with the healer, of course. But it still comes down to the same sort of question and changes a little bit the perspective on how they can be grouped up, whether they can be in their own group, do they have to be spread out amongst other groups. I tend to like the more traditional approach of, like one healer per group so that they know who they're supposed to be healing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it really depends. I mean, this is an entirely different type of system. I can see, I tend to agree, I think Brand mentioned it, having the devout more in some of the ancillary groups, having the devout in the support groups or the ranged DPS groups and stuff. I can kind of agree with seeing that, though they are kind of melee focused a little bit. They're still spell based, whereas the pure healers, they're probably going to be very desperately needed on the front line.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, as a pure healer, they've got one job, and that's to heal. So they're going to be wherever they need to be to heal, and that might mean just going back and forth down the front line or back and forth from the front line to the group behind you healing, because the devout have more capability to heal the front line because they're already there. They'll probably be throwing in bonus healing, extra healing as needed, or just focusing on healing themselves, whereas a pure healer will definitely be doing kind of both groups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And Seker's pointing out that the devout is not melee or front line, and that's what I said. They are casters. They cast spells. They are illustrated with melee weapons, emphasizing or suggesting at least that they have some sort of melee capabilities. So I'm not willing to completely say they're not melee. And I do think there will be some on the front line, because they do also have some buffs that I think will be essential in the front line. However, I think you'll see more devouts with the ancillary groups, with the ranged, the ranged DPS, with the mages buffing their damage and stuff.
Yeah,
rather than seeing them all in the front.
They will need less intensive healing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whichever group the devout is with, the healer might not be there as much because the devout's there.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the front line, the devout is more going to be about buffing and just providing general overall like AoE style healing to keep everyone's health up and help relieve some of the stress from the healers so that they can focus on the wounds and everything. But that's just my pure speculation on the matter.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, with healers having been discussed, I think we had a pretty good conversation. Chat was very active. I want to thank you all. We are still going to hang around, but I will, for everyone else and everyone watching the video afterwards, bid you a farewell.
See you soon.
Yep. Hopefully next week or the week after.
Week after.
Yeah, week after.
For this